that God has worked for you. And we're very grateful that you were able to come to share that with us today. And you're always welcome. You have a great week, a great month, the balance of August. And I look forward to coming out, and I'll probably time it for lunchtime. Anyway, we have lunch today afterwards. Let's take a few moments to just share a few thoughts. As I said, I was missing for a couple of weeks in England, and my excuse for going was my mom's 90th birthday. But just a couple of days ago, I was in Westminster Abbey with my wife. We had gone for a couple of days to Ramsgate, where she has a friend. And then we got to Hereford and spent a week with family, and then they had a couple of days at the end. And there we were in Westminster Abbey. And if you grow up in England, of course, you are required to visit churches. I've visited dozens of churches and cathedrals in my life because that's what British kids have to do. And then, of course, you have to visit castles, and then England is very famous for pubs as well. Don't get the wrong impression. Pubs are not drinking halls. Since they date back hundreds of years, and they have lots and lots of them, they're a combination of coffee shop, sandwich, fast food, and all sorts of other things as well. They're just institutions anymore. But here we were going through the great church, which is the People's Cathedral, and names are important. As I mentioned, churches are just institutions in Europe. My brother-in-law, who spent his career in international finance, is in retirement. I asked Gary, what did you do today? And he said, well, I went to visit a church. A wonderful example of medieval architecture. And he's not a, quote, religious person, unquote, by nature, but he visits churches all over the place, wherever he goes, because they speak to him, and he loves the architecture. As we're going through this, the People's Cathedral, names are important, of course, names that live for hundreds and hundreds of years. We went to the cathedral in Hereford, which has a copy of the Magna Carta. Anybody remember what the Magna Carta is? All right, the foundation of English common law, you know. To no man will we sell or deny justice. All of our modern jurisprudence comes from that. So King John comes to mind, you know, the guy who was forced to sign that. As we're going around the cathedral in Westminster, there are names that speak. Stephen Hawking was buried there in the last few years. And ironically, there's his gravestone. Here lie the immortal remains of Stephen Hawking. And he's buried right next to Charles Darwin and Isaac Newton. You know, these are great names that everybody knows in the world of science. C.S. Lewis is buried. Well, he's not buried there. He's buried in Oxford. But there's the memorial stone. And around it is inscribed, he says, I believe in Christianity for the same reason I believe in the sun. Even though I do not believe in the sun because I see it, but by the sun I see everything else. And the irony is, I'm walking across Stephen Hawking's name. I'm walking across Newton. I'm walking across Darwin. I even walked across C.S. Lewis. The great apologist for Christianity. Probably you may remember him as the guy who wrote Chronicles of Narnia and numerous other children's stories. But in fact, in his professional career, he's a professor of medieval literature at Cambridge University. And he was an Oxford graduate, things like that. Names. I went through the Tower of London and was able to talk with my wife about the stories of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, you know, people who shaped history. One ironic twist to that is as you walk into it, if you've ever seen anything on television, a royal wedding, any great events at Westminster Abbey, people enter through the great entrance at the west, and they always split to the left or the right, because right in the middle is one grave that nobody ever walks on. And that's this grave here. It is the grave of the unknown soldier. And it's rather emotional to see. I was surprised. My dad, at the end of the war, and for a couple of years afterwards, was in Italy. And some years ago, I was able to go to Naples and spent a few days, and actually drove all by myself up to where my dad had worked. And he had worked as a soldier before he was demobbed, and had spent his time digging up fallen soldiers and replanting them in the graveyards at Monte Cassino. And when to be honest, Naples was a dump. If you ever want to go there, well, go there. But I was by myself, and I wanted to go see Pompeii, things like that. But Naples, nothing to write home about. Sorry if you're Italian. But anyway, it was, I remember one day saying to somebody, this place stinks. They said, you should have been here 3 months ago. We had a garbage strike. And it was not very impressive. But to get out of there and to go into the countryside was actually, wow, it's beautiful. And to go to Monte Cassino was beautiful. The most beautiful place was the graveyard where soldiers, and it was immaculately kept. But through all of that experience, the thing that struck me the most was I walked up to the first white grave marking, the first cross, and it said simply, to an unknown Canadian soldier. And boy, it just gripped me. And I had the same overwhelming feeling as I walked to the end of the tour, to the grave of the unknown soldier. Not even the monarch walks over that grave. Names are important, and here is the remembrance among all the kings and the poets and the prime ministers and the great ones who've gone before, most of whom you probably wouldn't even know if I were to try to rehearse any of the names. But nonetheless, they are revered. But the most striking is this anonymous soldier, because there is within the heart of everyone the awareness that we're all going to fade. And this is somebody that we didn't even know but gave his life for our freedom, for our liberties, and for whatever the greatness of the country that may continue. I couldn't help but reflect on that. Here I am, come home to honor my mother, who's 90, and to just spend a little time with my aunt, who's 97, and to realize, as I'm talking about family issues and speaking with my mom and remembering my dad dad died about 23 years ago now, but I've got a picture of my mom and dad. But to realize that I did not know the name of my father's mother. That is to say, I did not know my grandmother's name. She died a year before I was born. And to sit there with Aunt Molly, took her out for lunch last Sunday, and to sit there with my younger brother and to talk with her, and I ended up asking, what was your mother's name? What was my grandmother's name? Never knew it, because she always referred to as grandmother. Emily, that was her name. And to realize that my Aunt Molly had a twin sister who died in the first year of her life. And I remember, I know her name because her name was given to my sister, Esme Leona. And so I am aware that here my aunt had, a twin sister, an identical twin, who was lost because of that. To realize as I'm talking to her that I have had an uncle, I think he died in the first year of my life, that I never knew. And there was a lot of tragedy around that. He died homeless, as far as I understand. He had a number of afflictions, and in his death, I never knew my Uncle Ben, although, according to my dad, he was an inspiration to his little brother, Derek, my dad. He was a bricklayer, and so he passed that inspiration on to my dad. My dad eventually, when I left home and went to school, my dad also quit his job and went back to school and was able to fulfill his dream, because he never could do that because of the war. He became a bricklayer. But I never knew Uncle Ben. And I have cousins because of whatever was going on with Ben and the woman he was married to briefly. I have a cousin I never met, and another cousin who wasn't even raised in the family. She was given up for adoption. And I did not know the name of Beryl until my niece was contacted through social media very briefly by somebody by the name of Beryl, who was trying to inquire, are you related to, and to try to figure out where she came from. But I have cousins I've never met. I had an aunt whose name I didn't know. I have an uncle I never met because he died. And it's surprising how those things impact you as you're talking. Even though I was talking to my Aunt Molly at one particular point, took her out for Sunday lunch, which is, an institution in England still. And at 97, she still has a very good appetite, does Aunt Molly. I was surprised. She couldn't eat quite all the beef I gave her, but she ate everything else I got for her. And but at one point, and she's really sharp, but she suddenly said, she looked at me and she looked at my little brother and she said, now you two are cousins, right? No, Auntie, this is Derek's youngest son, Paul, and I'm his oldest son. You remember I'm the better looking one? Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And my mother at 90 is as sharp. She complains about her rheumatism, and she's had a hip operation and a knee operation. But it was kind of ironic. See, the nieces and nephews, that I have, they're gathered around, and they've all, they're kind of pleased with themselves. They've done university, and they're accomplished and everything else. And they all gather around, and they have partners now. And I've been privileged to perform some of the weddings. I got another one coming up next year, but here, Simon's going to marry a doctor, and John is hanging out with another really smart young lady. They got to comparing degrees, who got first-class honors, who got second-class honors, this sort of thing. And they go, Emily, well, I have a master's. Oh, okay. Never mind. And they're all working in London and doing great things. And hey, John, any chance you can introduce me to Boris Johnson next time we're here? No, Uncle Bob, I can't. But I'm working for somebody who's on a first-name basis with him. Oh, okay, humbled. Things like that. And they all gather around, my mother, and they're all going to try and take her on at Rummy or Scrabble. And none of them can do it because she will not give an inch. Not that she's competitive, it's just that she won't give an inch, Names, people. I realize through all of that names, wow, all that it says about me, all it says about you. And I know very well that, if I were to be raptured right now, you'd all go and have lunch. And 20 minutes from now, you'd talk about me. But 20 years from now? Really? 20 years from now, 30 years from now, who was Uncle Ben? Who is Beryl? Who was my grandmother? Names, they go by. Our identity is lost. And because of that, we can often feel disoriented. We can often feel just, without identity. We can wonder about how transitory our life is. In Matthew 10, Jesus talked about a name, really. He, and you could read this in an ominous way. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Now, you can take it that way. And you can start to be overwhelmed by a sense of, wow, you should be afraid of God. But what is Jesus' point as he is saying these things? He clarifies, are not two sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. Oh, well, what he's saying is, don't be impressed with people who could perhaps put you to death. Realize that your life, your soul, your being is greater than anybody can touch. Think of it this way. Your Father counts you as valuable. Your Father in heaven treasures you. Your name is known. Bob may not know his grandmother's name, but God does. Bob may never meet his cousins, but God has them in his hands. In fact, when you feel alienated, lonely, abandoned, and let's face it, without stability in people's lives. So think of people who made a big name for themselves. Anybody ever heard of Robin Williams? Okay, everybody heard of Robin Williams. But when he was told, you have onset of something that could rob you of your wit, your humor, your stability, your balance, he was overwhelmed, and he took his own life. A very sad loss. And yet Jesus says, even the very hairs of your head are numbered. So don't be afraid. Don't be overwhelmed. You're worth more than many sparrows. And at times of loneliness, at times of defeat, at times that you feel, well, I think of my mom. It was a long way away now. And after my dad died, quite a few years ago now, 22, 23 years ago, she reflected one day upon the fact that she was living alone. My brother's very close, my sister's very close. She is a great treasure to my nieces and nephews. Even my kids who grew up here, my youngest daughter came for this family get-together, plus her youngest daughter came because they treasure the connection with their family in England. But, I have other kids who couldn't make it. But my mom referred to a prayer for those who live alone and perhaps feel that isolation. And I found that prayer out, and I won't read it all to you, but it said simply, I live alone, dear Lord, stay by my side. In all my daily needs, be my guide. Grant me good health, for that I pray, to carry on my work from day to day. Keep pure my mind, my thoughts, my every deed. Let me kind and unselfish in my neighbor's need. Spare me from fire, from flood and malicious tongues, from thieves, from fear and evil ones. If sickness or an accident befall, then humbly, Lord, I pray, hear my call. And when I'm feeling low or in despair, lift up my heart and help me in my prayer. I live alone, dear Lord, yet have no fear, because I feel your presence ever near. I refer to Robin Williams, who felt no sense of presence because he had not been aware of that. He had not come to that understanding. I know my mom is moving here in just a week or so, and she said bluntly, I'm moving from an apartment where I am able to cope, but as my health is going, you're a long way away. And Paul is not always available. And Esme may not be available. And the grandkids, much as I love them, I want to be where there is a little more physical support. And so she's going to more of an assisted living situation. But nonetheless, no matter how much assistance you have in living, there is an awareness that eventually we are all alone. And we feel God's presence sometimes through the support of others, sometimes through the ministry of others, but eventually we have to feel that by an awareness of God's very presence. The fact that, as Jesus said, I've numbered the hairs on your head. You're valuable to me. I am blessed in this day and age. We can make cell phone calls. And as one thing that I treasure now, I can call my mom up anytime, although I find I have slipped in priority. I used to, call and invest a lot of money to make a transatlantic phone call. Now I just have a flat, basic monthly plan. I can call anytime. And, of course, as a result of that, my mother will inform me, don't call during certain hours because your sister's middle child may want to call at that time, and I don't want you cutting her off. Thanks, Mom. I used to be number one son. I've gone from the penthouse to the outhouse, simply in priority here. But she's blessed to have a great, circle of support in family and friends. But ultimately, she is an individual, and her strength is in her relationship with God. As I said, cell phones are a blessing. I actually now have a truck, that gives me hands-free, so I can drive and talk to my mom at the same time. But her great security is in her relationship with God, through her knowing Jesus Christ. As I said, it's a mixed blessing. She every now and then views my sermons on the web. Mixed blessing, because then every now and then she can call me and give me an evaluation. I notice you've gained a few pounds, Robert, so I wear dark clothing and try to appear just a little. And then reassure her, the camera added 10 pounds, Mom, 10 pounds. But I know my mom is safe, and God has her as he has me. and I feel his presence. But nonetheless, I reach out to others as well, because there is strength in community, there's strength in family. And even though I came home knowing I had half a dozen challenges to face, nice to take a break, nice to do those things, but here I come back and I have to remember, no, you got half a dozen things pressing in on you and life is going on. You can't be on vacation too long. But knowing that despite the fact that I will be forgotten very quickly, if I pass, and others who gave life to me along the way will be forgotten. None of us is forgotten to God. In the same way, I am not forgotten by him. In Revelation, full of imagery, full of vision, full of, perhaps you might even say at times, hyperbole, but he communicates this: whoever has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who is victorious, that's you, I will give some of the hidden manna. Oh, highly symbolic, but it is the strength and the nourishment that God gave to Israel in the wilderness and continues to give to us, spiritual Israel. I will also give that person a white stone with a new name. And that's kind of odd in a way, but you know, what is this white stone he speaks of? It's an image that was taken from everyday life back then. Have you ever gone to a wedding, ever gone to a banquet, ever gone to a family occasion where it's big enough that they need name places? You know, somebody put a card on the table. This is where Robert sits. This is where Shelley sits. This is where Fred sits, and so forth. Well, that's what they used to do at Roman banquets. But they would use not a name plate or not a piece of cardboard that was folded. They would use a white stone that a servant had written on. But here, the imagery is of a new name, a new identity, a new relationship that's being forged. And this new name written on it, known only to the one who receives it, because it is a personal relationship that's just being defined. And that particular relationship is your relationship with God through Jesus Christ. I know when Shelley married me, she said, well, I'm not going to call you Bob, because everybody's called you Bob at some time or another. I'm not going to call you Robert, because, well, you're known as Robert. Rob, Robbie, you know, Bobby, you know, everybody's called you something along the line. I'm going to call you something unique. Okay. And so finally, after thinking it over and after a while, she cunningly announced, let me see, your name is Ro, R-O, Bert. If I stop the row, you'd just be Bert. Okay. So from then on, it became, hey, Bert! Now, that's better than hey, you. But if you ever heard if you're ever we're ever in a crowded room, or it's lunchtime here next week, or whatever's happening, and you hear somebody yell, hey, you, could be anybody. But if you hear somebody, you know, if you hear a cute blonde raising her voice and saying, hey, Bert, that's my wife calling me. It's a new name. I didn't anticipate that. I don't know how I feel about it right now. I'll let you know after I processed it. But the point is, that's, you know, you say, well, what do you mean get a new name? It's a new identity, a new feeling, a new relationship. It's a new something, and it's known to you. It's known to you. It's your reality. And you say, well, you know, God is, well, there are billions of us. How do you know God in such a way? I was thinking about that a few days ago, and we just had like 3-4 days in London. And Shelley'd never been there before, but you get around London by the tube, all right? You call it the metro, you call it LRT, whatever you like. But the tube is because, like, it's a whole bunch of tubes underground. It's been there, it's been developing over the last 120 years. And every day, about 4 million people use the tube in Greater London. All right, we go back and forth. And then, you know, you go, first of all, we stayed out where John lives in Dulwich, sort of like used to be a village, but now it's part of this greater London sprawl. And we take a train into London Bridge, and then from there you can go on the metro or the tube or whatever you want to call it, all over the place. And it's kind of a different experience because there's a tube at this level, and if you go to a station, then you walk down further and get another tube to another station, and you realize without any effort, you're now 200-300 feet below street level. But the irony of that is 4 million people moving around, not to mention the people using the red buses and the trains to get to the tubes. And it is such a sophisticated system now, you don't even have to buy tickets. All you do is walk up to the gate, and you reach in your pocket. Let's see. Here it is. Okay, bank card. Okay, and you just touch a contactless bank card. Beep, and you walk through, and you get on the train, and you get to the other end of wherever you're going, and you can't get out unless you go beep, and it automatically calculates how much you owe, and it just takes it out of your bank account without any effort. It's almost like having a second wife. It's just. But I mean, the first day I was there, I walked up to the place, and the guy looked at me like I was an idiot. What do you want? I want a ticket. I want to get from here, Dulwich, into London Bridge. Finally gave me a ticket. And then I sort of figured out, well, you could buy tickets from this ticket machine, which is why he thinks you're an idiot. And thirdly, you don't even have to buy tickets. You can just go beep, and you go anywhere. The mind of a man came up with a computer program that can cope with 4 million people just going beep every day. Don't even have to have tickets. How many people can God relate to? How many unique bank accounts, if you want to use that analogy, can God cope with? How many prayers can he hear at one moment? Well, he created a man who could come up with a program that could process a vast amount of information almost instantly. And yet God is greater than that man by how many power to infinity? Is God able to give you a unique name, a unique identity? And is he able to cherish you to the point where you can actually believe that he knows the hairs on your head are numbered? And the answer is yes. I may not know my grandmother's name, but he has her in his heart for eternity. And someday I will meet her and I will know her personally. That sense of security strengthens you. That sense of security sustains you through trials and challenges, even the ones that dear young lady talked about a while ago. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, today we meditate for a few moments on your grace, your mercy, but most of all, the enormous power of your love. And we thank you that whatever our challenges, whatever our position in life, wherever we've come from, you are going to lead us into eternity as the one who is known as our Father who is in heaven. And we thank you that none of us is lost. None of us is without security in you. None of us is alienated from comfort and kindness. And we thank you that through the ministry of Camp Living Waters, there are those that can come to know that, even though they cannot see it around them, perhaps on a daily basis. We thank you that we, as your children, have come to see that. And in worship and in prayer today, we understand that we share that with each other. We strengthen and we encourage each other in this journey you've called us to, which is going to lead us into everlasting life. And for that today, we are grateful and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.